Hare Krishna at the ISKCON temple.
Yoha.
With the resident monk, Sanatan Gopal Das.
Yeah, Shanice, that's my name. Yes, sorry.
Thanks for joining us today.
I didn't realise I had to verify this.
I thought you were going to say that higher.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Thank you for joining us.
So today we're doing some storytelling and...
Oh, okay.
Yes, you have lots of stories, don't you?
Yeah, one or two.
Yeah.
Send other people to sleep.
Amazing. Yeah. So we're just gonna, I'm not really gonna speak too much.
Really?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So you're just gonna tell us a story and analyze it for us and get the spiritual wisdom and...
Yeah, I think Shanice will get your insights, because I think people would like to know what you feel about the situation. And obviously you're very, like, in terms of how you've explored spiritual life is a lot richer than my background. So you would have like read of or come across and spoken to many practitioners of many practices. So I think it'll be good for everyone at home or wherever you are to hear Shanice's insight.
Hopefully,
if you want to hear Shanice's insight, what did I do? Put a thumbs up or a like or something, right?
Yeah, but I mean, it's a little bit hard to see from here.
Okay, just like rain in those thumbs up and likes and hearts and whatever is on there. Whatever.
You're good at this.
Yeah, I've seen.
You should promote this for me.
I ain't got that much time. Too many stories to tell. But yeah, so I think, Shanice, you wanted to know more about like obstacles on the spiritual path. Was there a reason why you wanted to know about that in particular? Like,
I think it's just sort of beneficial for everyone. Sorry, Neil, can you let them in, please? Can you keep the door open as well?
Oh, the problems with lives. Okay, yeah.
Sorry, we've got people coming in to watch. Yeah, so I just thought a story related to obstacles would be a good idea, because I think everybody can relate. Everybody can relate to that, and
maybe they don't know this is life.
Yeah, so stories with obstacles and stories relating to each other, because I think everybody can relate to that, and I think there's so much information that gets passed down in terms of stories. I mean, when I first learned that storytelling is a way to pass on spiritual wisdom, that totally blew my mind. And now the fact that I didn't do well at school now makes sense, because no one explained that to me. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's good to speak about obstacles. Obstacles on the spiritual path is relevant before you even know about spirituality. It's relevant while you're quite young in spiritual life and on the path. It's very relevant as you're getting more senior or advanced on the spiritual path, because at that stage, the obstacles are more apparent, or can even be at a stage a lot stronger than they used to be, like temptations and things like that. But also we hear from books like the Srimad Bhagavatam, obstacles are going to hang around for a long time until we're really self-realized. But ultimately obstacles are like a test. So like, I know you didn't do so well at school, and I don't want to bring back bad memories, but you know, sometimes you have tests with multiple choice questions. Like you got a question, it could be, instead of what is it, they give you option A, option B, option C, like that. And so the idea isn't to make the thing a lot harder, is actually for you to revise a lot better so you could get better and pass the exam and do great things in life. We may have different experiences of that. That's the point. And sometimes these obstacles are like providing many options to a question, but obviously only one's right. But it makes you think a lot harder and a lot longer, and that allows you to grow. So I think that's kind of one thing I wanted to say. Obstacles, especially in the tradition that I'm practicing, Bhakti Yoga, Krishna consciousness, obstacles can be the way to spiritual perfection rather than blocking the way. So you can imagine, like, you know, if you're really tired, to go back to your house, there's a stairwell. So, and lots of, like, you know, steps. And you might be thinking, like, this is an obstacle, like, you know, but it's allowing you to go to the place that you want to go at the same time. And I think if we have that mindset, it could really transform the way we approach obstacles. And I think that's one nugget of wisdom that I've got in the last few years. It's just like, really allowed me to appreciate obstacles and review the way I see them. And ultimately, one of the saints in our tradition said that this path of bhakti is littered with thorns. Like, you know, you got flowers like rose and you got the thorns, but the whole path is littered with thorns. And you got to go forward. There's no way to avoid not stepping on a thorn. And part of spiritual life is about making friends with those thorns. So I just wanted to say that from the get-go. Also, I'm going to apologize because I got a cough sweet in my mouth, so you might be hearing some rattling against my... Would they hear that?
Probably, yeah. If the mics
Okay.
decide to work today.
Fine. Anyway, it's just to add a bit of flavour to what was said. So yeah, I remember hearing this story. It's from an author, I can't remember when he wrote this book, but it's a long time ago, a good few decades ago. And really, really instructive. And I try and tell it every so often, not just to remind myself, but it's such a powerful story, it's so instructive. And I think when it comes to obstacles, there's probably 4 or 5 stories off the top of my head we could tell. And like you're saying with stories, they're very good because they appeal to many people, but they're multi-layered. And how rich a story isn't just based on the actual story itself. It's based on the knowledge and experience of the person that's hearing the story and the trials and tribulations that they've gone through in life. And if they've got spiritual teacher as well, then they can really dissect it and go deep into a story. So that's why, like, many of these stories are stories that I've heard when I was really young. And then when now I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking, wow, actually, there's this point, there's that point. We could like break it down in so many ways. So I'm hoping, therefore, when we tell this story, when you hear it the first time, you might think, okay, yeah, I got it. But then as we kind of dissect it slowly, and maybe we could dissect either the whole story today or over multiple weeks, depending on like time limit and stuff. But I think the aim is not just to tell a story for the sake of telling a story, but to tell a story so you really think, wow, that's hit home. And yeah, if anyone's watching at home also, if you have a question about an obstacle, either related to this story or just in general, it doesn't need to wait for the appropriate part of the story, the appropriate story. Maybe they could just ask anyway. And we could cover, in that way, we could cover any sort of obstacles as well. How many fans have you got on this one?
What, like followers?
Oh, followers, yeah, stalkers.
Like 1,700 something.
Wow, that's a lot. I was going to take the mic for a second. I thought you were going to say 1. All right, fine. 1,700 people follow you.
Something like that. Something. I don't know.
Wow, that's incredible. Okay, so I'm hoping out of 1,700 people that are following you or subscribe to you or whatever the thing might be, some of them might decide to open up on this forum and say, yo, Shanice, I have got this obstacle. I've not opened up, or I've had this obstacle for a while. I have asked and I've not really received an answer that really resonates. And in that way, we can churn more than just what I'm saying, but what they have as well. But okay, let's get cracking.
Please.
So this story is about like these creatures at the bottom of an ocean.
Oh.
And they look a bit like octopuses, or what's octopuses plural? Octopi?
Octopi.
Octopi. Okay, right. So many of these sort of creatures, they look really weird, like white, big head, and these like long tentacles, but they're right at the bottom of the ocean. And pretty much their whole life, the way they're designed, all they do is hang on to like rocks and the sand and to plants and coral or whatever it can, and they just hang on for dear life, their whole life. And if food comes their way, they eat it. But otherwise, because they're so afraid of what might happen to them when they let go, because the current's quite strong, and you know they'll get flung in the current and hurt and die, and you know literally God knows what would happen to them. And from one generation to another, they've been told all you need to do is just hang on tough, hang on tight, hang on for your dear life, and everything will be okay. And that's kind of like the mantra that's been passed on one generation after another to these creatures at the bottom of the ocean. However, one time, one of the octopi, right? One of the octopi amongst all of them said, there's got to be more to life than just hanging on for dear life. This is boring, and we're just doing the same thing, and we're hoping for the best. And surely there must be something beyond this region of the ocean. Surely there's something even higher up. I don't know, but I feel my life is unfulfilled unless I know for certain that there's more to life than just this. And as soon as he started voicing these like opinions, they weren't strong at that time, the other octopi in that community was saying, don't be so foolish, are you daft, did your mum drop you on your head, and all of these sort of things. And why would you ever want to let go? We've got it so comfy here. The food comes to us, all you need to do is hang on and not say a word. But he was like, no, I've got this feeling there's something more to life than this. And maybe this life is okay for you, but I just will feel unfulfilled unless I just go somewhere else. And like this, it was going back and forth. They were really trying to convince him. And at one point, that octopus just decided, I've had enough. Better to just die than to live this life. And so as he let go, sure enough, the strong currents swept him along, and everybody was saying, hold on, like, why you still have a chance? But he decided no. And the strong currents like knocked him against several rocks, and he was getting badly bruised. Some of the octopi in the community were saying, no, try and hold on while you still can. Some were like ridiculing him. Some were saying, you say, we told you not to do this. It's not too late. Why don't you come back? That octopus didn't. And he was getting battered and bruised. Like literally the current was knocking against one rock or another. Certain points of the journey, he thought, is there any purpose to this? Maybe I made the wrong decision. Maybe I could go back. Well, now at the point of no return, I can't even go back. And I'm not confident about what's going to happen. And the way I'm getting flung about, if it carries on like this, I'm going to die anyway. Eventually, the tide carried him, well, not the tide, the current carried him to a region beyond the rocks. And it just calmed off, and it was just really peaceful. And he felt a way he'd never felt before. And he felt free. He felt kind of liberated. He felt happy. He'd seen things that he's not seen before. He realized he's not dependent on what he felt, or others felt they had to be dependent on. He was living and seeing a new thing. So he was happy. And that same current then lifted him up. So now he's like floating really high up. And it lifts him back across to where he was clinging on to, but just a lot higher up. And then, because he was high up, he was trying to shout to his friends and his family that actually, all you have to do is let go. Come with me, come with me. But because he was so high up, partially they couldn't hear him, but at the same time when they saw him, all they said, because they couldn't recognize him, they said, oh, how? Look, here's the Messiah. Here's the Messiah, the one that's been chosen to come and save us. Here he is. Here he is. Let's just pray to him. And the so-called Messiah was saying, no, you just have to let go. Let go, and you could be free from your situation, and you could also be like me. But what were they doing? They were just clinging on for dear life, saying, oh, Messiah, come back and save us. So when I first heard this story, I was like, wow, blown away, because firstly, it's an interesting concept, like creatures at the bottom of the ocean. But this is relating a lot to religious life and spiritual life, and a lot of misconceptions within that. And so therefore, I thought it would be good to go through each part of the story and maybe break it down, dissect it. Maybe Shanice, like I was saying before, you might have come across something like this in your life, and you might have a lot to share, and I think it'd be good for us to hear. But yeah, on that front, the first bit was the community of octopi, hanging on for dear life, and had been told to do that. And that's all they knew, and that's all they had, and they'd become very satisfied. In fact, they bought into this idea that happiness is just hanging on, waiting for food to come to you, or not experiencing life because of fear of something else happening, of the unknown. And that's basically the number one obstacle for many people approaching spiritual life, is that they are afraid of a new experience. They're afraid of being vulnerable because they're clinging on to their comfort zone. And comfort zone could be many things. It could be fear. So therefore I have to work a certain way, speak a certain way, have friends and assets and all of these sort of things. And I'm going to spend a lot of time and energy doing this, because this stuff, I know if I hang on to this, I'll be happy, I'll be satisfied. And anyone that has any other idea that's atypical, that's divorced from my understanding, I'm going to ridicule them. So if you remember the first octopus, the one that said, maybe there is more to this, the other one just kind of shut him down and said, no, what are you talking about? Our parents have said this, our parents have said this, everyone's around you said the same thing. Everyone else is happy, but that person, despite what other people were saying, thinking, no, but something doesn't quite feel right. There's something more to this. And I think, Shanice, that's the first obstacle in spiritual life. One is we're addicted to being in our comfort zone. And there's a battle at one point when you have a voice inside of you saying, but this is okay, but there is something more to this. I can feel it. And it's already difficult to overcome that within yourself. But if you're surrounding yourself with people that are just clinging on to materialism, And by materialism, I don't mean downright hedonism, like sex, drugs, rock and roll, but even just a mediocre lifestyle, devoid of any spiritual interest, is also materialism from our definition. So if one is always hanging around with that type of person, it's very difficult unless you've got really strong willpower to want to let go when others around you are saying not to. So I think peer pressure is a very big obstacle that people have to overcome before they can even step into spiritual life. What do you think about that?
I just think that when you're comparing the octopus that was sort of contemplating to let go and the other octopi that were hanging on,
Yeah.
How come the octopi that were hanging on didn't inherently think, or it didn't cross their mind that there is something else to this? If their soul is understanding that there's more to it, why didn't they question it like the other octopus?
Yeah, we say this is sort of the symptom and almost the problem of free will, that we have free will to choose one thing over another, and when the soul misuses its free will, it means what I can see right here and right now is a totality of reality, and there may or may not be something, but why risk it?
It's
what
like
I have
the fear
right,
of it.
it's the fear. It's usually a fear factor that this is what I know. I'm okay right now. I'm living. I'm surviving, or whatever it might be. Or it might even be I'm feeling happiness. I'm feeling pleasure. And if there is something else, kind of like the Cinderella story, it will come to me. As long as I grab on, everything will come to me. Even if there's any other answers or anything else in the universe, that will come through me through the TV, through a man, through the postman. It will come to me that way. So it's kind of like that thinking. So it's like, when you're addicted to something, it's very difficult to give up the addiction, even if you know better, even if you know potentially there's a better life. The addiction is overwhelming at times. And so the idea is we're all addicted, whether it's to hedonism, whether it's to lust, or even whether we're addicted to just mediocrity. We're kind of addicted to it, and we're driven, on the other hand, by fear of the unknown. So therefore, let me stick with what's known. But a spiritual practitioner has to overcome that fear, or must be at least willing to embrace some part of it to experience a little bit of spiritual life.
So the octopus that let go and he was flying by, because I was just thinking about karma, is it his karma to try and sort of lift those people up and allow them to see that there's a different way, or is his karma looking at those people and seeing this is sort of where I was and this is where I am now? Like, how does karma sort of play into that scenario there?
Yeah, actually, I'll take it a step back. Karma is kind of like our duties that we perform, and karma is like a reaction from all the good and bad we've done in previous lives. So just going back to what you were saying before, one of the reasons why people find it difficult to let go or have no interest or next to no interest in spiritual life is they've got quite heavy karma. And they're just creating new karma, burning off their previous karma, and creating new karma. And karma means basically material desire. So therefore, somebody who's practiced a little bit of spiritual life, directly or indirectly in the previous life, they're more likely to have this inherent feeling that, let me try letting go. And when they let go, they don't really have a duty to anyone and everyone, because they're on a spiritual path. Spiritual path means you're not obligated to do material duty unless it helps you in spiritual life. But when one takes the spiritual life, one of the symptoms of that is they become what we call paradukha dukhi, that how can I be happy when other people are in distress? And so naturally a saint, someone elevated, someone self-realized, will see the pain and suffering of other living entities and that lifestyle of hanging on for their life. And even if they're thinking they're happy, somebody who's self-realized who can see things from a bigger point of view is just seeing it's just repeated birth and death. Where is the happiness? They're confused. Like if I was to hypnotize you and say, Shanice, you're now a dog and live your best life. And you're yapping, you're woofing, you're eating like a dog, walking like a dog, and you're really happy. So from one point of view, you're happy, but actually from our point of view, it's distress, right? It's hypnotized happiness. It's not real happiness. So as a spiritual duty, not karma, but as an act of compassion, then despite the mentality of the people that they themselves may have been born within and come from, they try to elevate them.
So, if someone doesn't have the right amount of karma in their being, when it comes to like the perception of spiritual life, they're not going to inherently want to do it.
No, but one of the keys to changing your perception, despite how heavy your karmic bank balance is just to, if you heard this, it will just be like, okay, that's describing me right now. So how can I expand my vision? By trying to associate with spiritually minded people. Even if you're not qualified to be with such people, even if you've got like heavy material desires, just being around saintly people can change your heart just like that. It may be just like that, it may be a gradual thing, but after a while you start thinking, no, I don't want to hang around more with those people that just like live. Actually, these guys are experiencing happiness that I can see that the others aren't experiencing. Maybe let me try and do something that they're doing and experience something like that. So that's why I was stressing the idea of peer pressure a lot. Unless you hear this and are willing to change your, the people that you befriend or the people you hang out with. I'm not talking about people you have to become buddy with, like really friendly with, but actually just to hear, different points of view from somebody who's walking that path. Unless we could try and do that once a week, or at the very least like once a fortnight or once a month. Or even now in the day of social media, even you can listen to these talks online if access is difficult. But if you're in Leicester, of course, we're here, so you can come in person, or check out Shanice's channel. But anyway, in any case, that's the idea. So if you're just hanging around with those octopi, so to speak, who are just hanging on to name, fame, money, adulation, family life, all of these things and things, this is all I need. I'm satisfied, I'll be happy. You just can't change your mentality unless you've done something in a previous life. It's just not possible.
So it's important for us to have, to understand spiritual wisdom. Can we, because when I was younger and I was trying to read, it just didn't contemplate in my mind or anything like that. So we need to have a spiritual teacher of sorts. But can't some people learn spiritual wisdom by themselves?
Yeah, that's a nice question. So people definitely can. It's interesting, this question somebody asked me the other day, exactly the same question. So maybe it's something I need to keep hearing myself as well. Anyone can pick up a book, like let's say the Bhagavad Gita, and that conversation led to a soldier becoming one of the most enlightened people in the planet, in the universe at that time. But the whole notion of it was one disciple speaking to a spiritual master and asking questions. That was the premise to it. But now we have that conversation between the spiritual master and the disciple as a book. And we can read it. Read it as it was spoken 5,000 years ago. So we could do that. But there's only one problem. Srila Prabhupada, one of our spiritual grandfathers, somebody said to him while he was on the planet, do I really need to have you as my spiritual master? Can't I read your books? And Srila Prabhupada went to his ear like this and said, yeah, but can my books do this to you? Like chastise you, tell you off, correct you. So the idea is when we read a book, we're reading it with our conditioned understanding. Which is like, you know, if I read something, you read something, a third person reads something and says, which bit did you like? Immediately that may be completely different. Just like, you know, I'll give us an example. If there's a bunch of girls and handsome guys coming down the street, one of the girls will fall head over heels in love with him. The other one might say, whoa, no, he's really ugly. They're looking at the same thing. How can they come to such different conclusions? So the mind is conditioned to see things in a certain way, and that condition of the mind is based on their karma. So even with something spiritually uplifting, the bits that you like, and the bits that you don't like, and the bits that you distance yourself from, will be down to your conditioning. And the bits that you like, naturally, will be coming from a previous life, that you're naturally attracted to. But to go a level further than that, you need someone that can take you beyond your conditioning, and for that, you can't be your own guru. That you need a spiritual teacher for, a spiritual guide, that can see what your understanding is, where you're lacking, and point it out to you. So for that, you need a living guide, actually. And until we get to that, and maybe one of the stories we could tell another week, it will illustrate that point. You could get to a certain level, but not beyond that. Because part of the system is to accept like knowledge from a spiritual teacher. It's like the last bit that's separating us from being humble. is to realize I can't do this alone. I need help from someone.
Okay. I want to talk about comfort zone and sort of how that applies in our day-to-day lives, sort of just being a regular person that doesn't really have any involvement in spiritual life. And then I've got another question about people that do have, that are comfortable in their spiritual life, because sometimes it's like, for example, you could have a priest. Maybe he thinks that being a priest is more comfortable than being a teacher because it's stressful and stuff. And being a priest, you don't have to put up with all of these confrontation and arguing with people.
Yeah.
So, like, how do those two things sort of, how do you understand those two things?
Yeah. Everyone is striving for a comfortable life rather. They like comfort. It's interesting, in the Sanskrit, one of the words for comfort is aram. And if you look at the way that's shaped, aram means without Ram. Ram is like an avatar of Vishnu. So to have a lot of comfort means to not have God in your life, or not have the spiritual quest in your life, or it can be like that. One time again, Srila Prabhupada said, if one has a casual approach to spiritual life, casual means casualty. So the idea is, whatever we do in this world, Shanice, the principles of yoga teach us, whatever we do, we're molding the mind to see the world in a certain way. And if we're addicted to comfort, beyond a certain threshold, where it stops us from getting up to practice spiritual life, and rather we watch TV, binge Netflix, or eat, or just go out, or just basically eat, sleep, mate, and defend, then we're molding our mind to see that as the highest thing in this world. So there needs to initially be a healthy balance between comfort and austerity. And we have to, at one point, realize human life is meant for more than eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Otherwise, I'm just an animal. There's no difference. So the Vedas, this ancient body of wisdom from the East, says actually the point that a human being becomes a human being is when they realize this life is meant for spiritual life. And that requires some austerity. Austerity means to go against my nature for comfort. So instead of spending so many hours in comfort, whatever that comfort might be, let me at least give half an hour to inquire about spiritual life, to hear a lecture, to read a book, to meet some saintly people, to put my questions to them. If we can't at least have that amount of austerity, and it's barely austerity, if we're saying austerity like that, then it's very difficult to go against what the mind wants you to do, which is just wallow in comfort, basically.
If you're somebody that's not taken to spiritual life, they would consider austerity things like going to work. So they would consider themselves being a spiritual person in the sense that maybe I'm contributing to society because of my work. But how do you, if for sort of the everyday person, how do you define austerity and sort of having to participate in the world?
Yeah, that's a nice question as well. So there's like austerity for the sake of austerity. And there's some people that are naturally austere. And it's also relative. So, you know, there's some people that are busybodies. They just can't sit still. Like, my mom is a bit of a busybody. She's always cleaning and doing something. And from my point of view, that's super austere. I'd rather just sit and watch football, or I don't know if MTV Base is still on, or whatever it is, play pool. That'll be my thing. So when I'm looking at her, it's austere. And for her, when she looks at me, she's probably looking at me thinking, if I try to do that, that would be austere for me. You know, that would just be unnatural for me to try and do that. So Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita talks about austerity in different energies or modes of nature. So mode of goodness, mode of passion, mode of ignorance. But our austerity is only spiritual if it allows us to understand we're not the mind and the body. So that busybody cleaner who's cleaning, who, let's say hypothetically, is just doing it because they have OCD, or they're doing it as a cleaner because they have that tendency and they need to make money to feed their kids and, you know, be in society. That doesn't necessarily mean that they want to be spiritual or they want to know their spiritual identity. It's just their conditioning to be like that. But the minute we sort of think about our nature and how we can engage our nature in such a way, in a spiritual path that allows us to uncover our spiritual nature, not from our imagination, but from a tradition that's age-old, with no cessation to it, that's basically what true austerity is. And so for a person that's a busybody, they could do service that connects them, for example, in our tradition, to Krishna. For someone who's maybe not so good with their hands, but maybe is a good speaker, they could speak. Someone who's good with technology, they could do social media. Basically, there's no one barred from spiritual life. The idea is you could either connect your nature, which leads to extreme comfort for you, whatever that comfortable picture looks like. For a person lazing on the sofa, that's comfortable. For a person that needs to be busy, that's comfort for them, basically. Or we could take to austerity, which means to do a path which we may not ordinarily do, or society doesn't ordinarily tell us to do, but we take up that path. And it's not mutually exclusive, Shani. So one can still work in society and still do this. That's like basically the art of it. And so just going back earlier, you were giving the example of a teacher versus a monk, or a teacher versus a priest, sorry, I think you said.
It's a priest deciding to be a priest rather than being a teacher. Because it's more comfortable to be a priest than it is to be a teacher. Yeah,
so generally in our experiences, if anyone tries to take on a spiritual position, let's say as a monk, if anyone was looking at me thinking, okay, he's not working anymore, the temple feeds him and clothes him, and it's not quite Versace, but I'm in a position in my life I'd rather accept that than going to work. Generally, if you take to a life of renunciation, born of frustration, of material life, that never lasts. Your purpose has to be a lot higher than just your frustration, and we see that time and time again now in contemporary times. And we've seen the warnings in dating back hundreds of years and thousands of years in different scriptures and things like that. So actually your renunciation shouldn't be born out of frustration. That's like the worst type of renunciation. Because the point is, even if you leave work, you don't leave your mind. You don't leave your conditioning. And even as a monk, there's many people who are not suitable to being a monk. It's not like a given. There's many people who are just not comfortable being by themselves, being alone, without music in the background. So it's not just a matter of no work or work. It's actually which environment suits your nature that allows you to take to spiritual life in a lot more of a progressive fashion.
I want to talk about how you said earlier about being casual in spiritual life.
Yeah.
And say, for example, someone like myself that's sort of trying to understand spiritual life, and I live by some of the regular principles, but say I still get intoxicated, say if I still drink. How does karma affect me then when I know that I shouldn't be doing it and I'm participating in a spiritual practice? Is karma more intense? Is it like, how does that work out there?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think the answer to this could last half an hour. I'll give you a short one. Okay. You were looking like, no, okay, yeah, definitely not.
I think it's been about 15 minutes now.
Okay. If somebody is taken to a spiritual path and says, this is the life I want to live, whether they're a monk or working in the outside world, it makes no difference. But because their condition is so strong, they end up, let's say, relapsing on a particular habit. Like you said, alcohol, it could be drugs, it could be sex, it could be eating something they shouldn't eat, whatever it might be. But there's at the end of that impulsive behavior, they're like, oh God, I shouldn't have done that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do it again. Please help me. That type of mentality is progressive. And you don't necessarily get any karma for that. It's just considered to be your conditioning.
Okay.
Like, we've been given an example. In India, they've got these fans like on the ceiling, and you just press the electricity, the switch, and it keeps going on like this. When you turn it off, like you turn off the switch, the fan keeps going on like that. It takes a little while before it goes off. And the same thing is true in spiritual life, that we have the momentum of all our material desires from this lifetime and previous lifetimes. And when we take to spiritual life, it's like we've turned the switch off, but some of that condition is still going round and round. And if we're patient with it while keeping the thing off and doing what we're supposed to be doing, eventually we'll get to a stage where we don't get affected by it and it won't be a thing at all. But until that time, it can still manifest in relapses and mistakes and desires. But if one is sensible and realizes, no, I'm just not going to do it again, I'm going to take to spiritual life, you don't get a karmic reaction for it. If someone steps out of spiritual life and says, I don't want to do this anymore, then yeah, you're under the laws of karma, basically, again. And karma means if you live at the expense of Mother Earth or another living entity or something like that, you get a reaction, basically. And it's not supposed to be a scary thing, it's just the dynamics of this world. But so yeah, the idea is, it doesn't matter how long you've been in the game, if you take to a spiritual path and you're trying your best, and you've got to remember, Shanice, some people in previous lives have been trying for many, many lifetimes, so it's a lot easier, seemingly, for them in this lifetime. And you may look at such a person and feel disheartened, but you're not supposed to be focusing on this person because you don't know how far ahead they are in the race, how many lifetimes they've struggled. One only needs to focus on where they are, be patient with themselves, at the same time kind of look at why it's happened, and was there any triggers, was it the people you were hanging around with, was it a certain environment, a situation, and try and remove that or discuss it with other people to work out what it is. But don't give up the actual practice of spiritual life, which is